Vnik Soup is a Twitter thread series and now YouTube channel where Pekka Kallioniemi introduces pro-Russian actors and propagandists from around the world. This includes so-called independent journalists, politicians, military personnel, and of course, just regular grifters looking to make money. The series has provided deeper insights into how online propaganda and disinformation works and how it is spread around the world. There are now more than 200 Vnik Soups, which introduce bad actors along with the strategies they employ to pollute the information space. As Pekka states, the first victim of war is the truth, and Russia has considered itself at war with the US and the perceived vassal states of the collective West, the EU, UK, and NATO for a number of years. Pekka has a PhD in interactive technology and is an expert on social media platforms, algorithms, and disinformation. He is also a NATO activist and runs a series on Kremlin assets, agents, and oligarchs called Vnik Soup, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Welcome to Silicon Curtain Podcast. Please like and subscribe, and do, of course, consider supporting the channel by becoming a patron or buy me a coffee. Pekka, it's a huge pleasure to welcome you back to the channel.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Third time. Apparently we have these good chats because again I'm here.
Absolutely. I mean, this is almost like an infinite barrel, as it were, that we can scrape here, because propaganda, information warfare, is an incredibly it's got huge funding behind it from Russia, and they're constantly changing narratives as well. So I don't think we'll ever run out of things to talk about. But I wanted to start really with the evolution of your digital campaigns, because Vnik Soup has grown and evolved in an extraordinary way, and now you're involved in video. You are a key I'd say personality on the Maria Report, which is a sort of hub for pro-Ukrainian. It's a sort of chat room for pro-Ukrainian audience. Tell me a bit about what you've been up to and how your Vnik Soups have evolved.
So maybe those who know what Vnik Soup is have realized that I don't really publish that much anymore. So I had this really hectic period busy period when I was just publishing basically every day or every other day. I was pushing out new threads on X/Twitter. But yeah, I've been doing other stuff also lately. So we have the Soup Central YouTube channel. We're also migrating to other platforms. We're gonna do some short form video content for various platforms, and there is also maybe a book coming on Vnik Soup. It's been something that people have been talking for a long time, but yeah, now it's finally in the works. So, but let's see how that goes. If it fails, I'll just publish the whole thing for free online. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, it's going. I mean, things are evolving, things are moving forward, which is nice. I don't think. Vnik Soup it's been really fun to do, but I also feel like trying something new and trying to find new audiences, because on social media we easily kind of get stuck in this information bubble. We talk to the same people, and then the whole kind of community starts slowly getting more and more passive, it's just keep on moving, and you probably know this because I know that you have a lot of stuff in the works too. So you just keep on doing and trying new stuff and seeing how it goes.
I think that's a really interesting point, because looking at the bubble, if you're a member of NATO and you're surrounded by the sort of memes and the messages, and of course, you've got Maria Report, which gathers quite a big audience, global audience. But nonetheless, all these places online, these are sort of digital communities, one could almost call them digital bubbles, which give you the impression that the whole world is talking about and thinking about Ukraine in the way that we are. But actually, if you look outside it and you look at the kind of the broad stats and the spread of different topics under discussion, you come to realize that actually this bubble is almost like a false impression. And, the rest of the world isn't necessarily focused on Ukraine and the same issues we are, especially true given what's happening in the Middle East. As part of your plans, and I know you're someone who's really fluent in this digital ecosystem, I imagine you're thinking very much, how do we break out of the bubble? How do we reach people and keep Ukraine top of the agenda, as well as fighting, disinformation that comes out of Russia?
So as a content creator, and I call myself these days a geopolitical social media influencer. So I'm in that business, I guess. I feel I've borrowed a page from the Russian propaganda book. So this kind of Firehose of falsehood approach, where you use multi-channel approach. Doesn't have to be multi-volume, but multi-channel approach is a good way to try to reach new audiences. Because for example, Twitter is very information bubble heavy platform. It's the algorithms basically force you into this bubble, which is very, very difficult to penetrate from the outside. So basically, you create your own little group, and it makes things seem much bigger than they actually are. Like as you said, like it's like, okay, everybody's still talking about Ukraine, but that's not the case. Many people have moved on to other things, and as we know from basic human psychology, people can usually have just one big topic on their mind at the time. So we remember this from the day Russia launched their full-scale invasion in February 2022. COVID just disappeared overnight. Nobody talked about COVID anymore, and that's it. And then, of course, a lot of the attention from Ukraine was refocused to the Middle East after the terrorist attack by Hamas. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but yeah, it's how do we break the bubble, and how do we reach new audiences? I mean, we have to be creative in that. We have to focus on many platforms as content creators. And of course, we also have to initiate dialogue with people who are genuinely interested in having a conversation, rather than just pushing out some narratives that they've learned from, I don't know, Jackson Hinkle or whoever it is. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a dialogue and like getting new perspectives. So people could and should challenge themselves more in these dialogues, with these dialogues.
Well, we'll come on to Hinkle in a minute, because he is one of the most toxic of all these figures. Another interesting trend, I think, and it's a discussion point more recently, as it's become potentially clearer what the strategic objective or lack of it is in especially Washington and Berlin. And this, I think, fairly ridiculous phrase, supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes. Whereas most of us are thinking, come on, hurry up, define as long as it takes, and put something like to achieve victory or to get your territories back, put some distinct goals and timeline against it. So that we have some fundamental strategic problems. We have, I think, possibly some divisions and debates in the major world capitals who are supporting Ukraine about what those objectives ought to be and how Ukraine is supplied in order to achieve them. As a creator, it's nice, isn't it? I mean, it's nice to reach a huge audience and see those big numbers when you publish a video. But actually, I've heard more and more people saying, well, actually, this is great, but how do we reach decision makers? How do we reach people who actually have some kind of leverage on this strategic thinking and leverage over the supply of armaments to Ukraine? Do you feel also that sense of really honing in on the audience and perhaps focusing more on getting action rather than simply, information out there?
As a Finnish person, I feel like Finland is pretty much giving out all the military aid that they can, that we as a nation can. So, I mean, I talk occasionally with decision makers, with politicians, and so on, especially people who are close and like friends to Ukraine. And I feel like in that like ecosystem, I don't really have a role at the moment, of course, other than just promote all kinds of aid to Ukraine and like fundraisers and so on. But I feel like especially in the United States, this would be extremely important that people contact their representatives, senators, so that these people actually they know what's actually going on, because they're also in their own information bubble, and like trying to penetrate that would be extremely important. So basically, at the moment, it seems that it's more like an internal dispute between two political parties and who gets what, and everything is they're trying to tie all Ukraine aid to something else. So it's the fence, or it's the border control, or it's the aid to Israel, or whatever it is. There's always this political struggle, but I feel like we have to remember that politicians and decision makers, they're just people. And then if we tell them these stories from Ukraine, like what's going on, what's really going on, these horrible stories of the atrocities that Russia is doing in Ukraine, they probably would listen, and we could actually make a difference. So yeah, that would be important.
And of course, Russia is not simply attacking informationally, it's attacking on multiple fronts. And Finland, to an extent, I mean, maybe it's a little easier because Finland is got incredibly close proximity to Russia, but also is the target of this direct action. One, Russia's always invested in a lot more agents and assets in Finland, and the so-called process of Finlandization, where you have this sort of hybrid sort of control. But at the moment, and of course, Finland's incredibly hawkish now, which is fantastic. And its tolerance for sort of Russian BS has practically disappeared. We have Russia trying to punish Finland by throwing migrants at the border. So it's not just an informational attack. You have very close proximity to the physical part of that aggression as well.
Yeah, and of course, before that, we had the sabotage of the Baltic connector gas pipe between Finland and Estonia. So it's just there's this strong hybrid warfare effort going on. I mean, Russia is basically conducting hybrid war against Finland right now, and so it's a challenge. So currently, the eastern border is closed, and you cannot seek for an asylum, or you can only in specific places and airports and this kind of location. So you cannot seek for an asylum at the border anymore, which makes a big difference, of course. But yeah, we share 1,300 kilometers of border with Russia. So of course we are kind of screwed in that sense that we have to figure out a way to how to stop the immigrant flows, or control them. Of course we don't have to stop them, but we have to control them. And because it seems that there's strong evidence that this is all being coordinated by FSB, then we can safely say that it's a hybrid warfare operation against Finland. And in these situations, we kind of have to think what is more important, national security or the right to seek for an asylum, for example. So we can kind of put that on pause on a national level. But definitely since Finland has joined NATO, definitely after Finland has provided quite a lot of humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine, Russia has increased their hybrid warfare activity in Finland.
And our old friend Bachmann has popped up again, hasn't he? Spouting Russian BS as well. Now, this is also part of another hybrid effort here. And I mean, we can't fail but to have noticed in the media this narrative of war fatigue popping up. Certainly the first sort of public announcement was a taped conversation or a prank conversation with Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy. But this is a narrative that seems to be echoing around the corridors of power. Is there good reason to think that this is actually another Russian sort of hybrid narrative, or one that they are seeing in the West and really trying to sort of amplify and increase?
I mean, they've been trying to do that since, I would say, October of 2022, after the annexation of the annexation of the four Ukrainian oblasts, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk, and of course Crimea is also in that. So they've been trying to kind of push out these narratives of ending like, let's have peace negotiations and so on, but I mean, they've been pushing those narratives out to the information space, to media, to social media. They've organized rallies for this, but I mean, the Russians have never been, the Kremlin have never been. They've always been saying that they are not ready to negotiate. So it's like this. There's two different messages. So there's the official Kremlin line, and then there's the disinformation, the propaganda model that they are pushing. That they are basically ready for negotiations, but they haven't been ready for. They've been rejecting negotiations for a long time. But we know that they've been trying to organize nationwide rallies in Germany, for example. They tried to do that last February. They had, I think they mobilized around 40,000 people, and it was basically rallying against the war and the military aid to Ukraine. There was at the same time, there was this Rage Against the War Machine rally in Washington, D.C., which is coming again. It's with a different name, it's coming again next February. So we know that they've been kind of trying to get these peace movements going around in Europe, and that increases war fatigue in a sense that it's of course propaganda. It's like this talking about the prospects of peace or negotiation or truce, kind of, it creates this idea to people that, okay, it's a possibility, even though it's not. So then maybe the logic here is that the decision makers, they think that, okay, maybe if we stop the military aid to Ukraine, we can have peace or something in that line. So there's definitely this fabricated model of talking about war fatigue and talking about peace negotiations, even though Russia is definitely not ready to do it. And we know this. If you look at their budget, I think they made a huge increase to their kind of a war budget or military budget. It's huge. So it doesn't really imply that they are kind of ready to stop the war. And there's also quite strong evidence that they want to create this kind of a land bridge to Moldova, to Transnistria. So I would imagine that they still would like to, for example, conquer or invade Odessa and the other areas in the Black Sea. So it's completely fake narrative that they're just bringing out to kind of increase the war fatigue in the West.
It's also rumored that Putin is unlikely to want to end what they term special military operation, what everyone else calls a war, because he's got an election coming up. I mean, that would be disastrous to end the war without any kind of tangible victories that his propagandists could spin. But he's in between two stools, as it were, because to scale up the war, clearly he's doing it on a budgetary level, but the parallel part of that is mobilization. But he dare not extend mobilization because the next phase would be to extend it into the larger cities, as they potentially, run out of prime candidates for mobilization in the provinces. I mean, there are rumors now that there's quite a few sort of sick people, alcoholics, etc. The quality of the conscripts from the provinces is pretty low. But he dare not do that before the election. So we're looking at a sort of, I would say a sort of stasis on the front, unless Ukraine can make some advancements, at least until the Russian election. It's also likely, is it not, that he's going to try to hang on until the US election, because he may think that that result could be favorable for Russia's strategy if, for instance, a Trump-like candidate is elected.
Yeah, so I think the problem with the US is that even though if Joe Biden wins, it might still there might still not be that much Ukraine aid anymore, because we've seen this kind of narrative change already. Like there are especially within the Republicans, there's a strong resistance to continuing the aid. So it'll still be a struggle, even if Joe Biden wins the presidency, or someone else, but it's probably Biden versus Trump. So yeah, about the mobilization, I feel like it's coming. My bet is that it would come sometime after the presidential election in Russia. And there's actually this wild theory, just a theory, that Russia actually wanted Finland to close their border completely if they mobilize so that young Russian men cannot flee through the Finnish borders. So if we start seeing something happening in Georgia, then we know that this is the case. So because if there is another wave of mobilization, be it partial or full mobilization, we will see a big traffic surge to Georgia, that's for sure. Putin needs some wins before the election still, because when the mobilization news comes in, then he's gonna need all the kind of support he can get from the Russian population.
And of course, we've got the second anniversary of the war coming up. They may well throw a ton of missiles at Ukraine, etc. But is that enough of a victory? Or can that be spun enough for people to really feel that this is, 2 years that were worthwhile? I think he's got a number of challenges. Now, this probably explains another phenomenon we're seeing. So we've got the war fatigue narrative. We've also got rumors of something called Maidan 3, which seems to be a hybrid warfare attempt to destabilize Ukrainian politics and society. And a sort of blast from the past, the name of Vladislav Surkov has appeared again. Now, he's one of the architects of the original invasion of Crimea and the incredible propaganda success that surrounded that. What do we know of Maidan 3? And is it sort of highly symbolic that people like Surkov, who've been sidelined for a number of years, seem to be being brought back onto the propagandist stage?
Yeah, what do we know about Maidan 3 is basically I think the big idea is to remove Zelenskyy from his position. Like that's how to do it. And we've already seen this falsified kind of quarrel between Zaluzhny and Zelenskyy, which like it's been like made into a big thing. Of course, we don't know how big it actually is. Probably not as big as the Kremlin wants us to think it is. But it's basically this hybrid warfare operation again. I would imagine that a lot of what's happening or has been happening in recent months are related to this project. And Surkov is basically, as you said, he was the puppet master during the Euromaidan incident and the Revolution of Dignity. What happened in 2014, of course, the annexation of Crimea, but he was also very close to Viktor Yanukovych, and he was kind of advising him and giving him information during the Euromaidan protests. And but he's extremely creative in these propaganda efforts. So basically, what Surkov has done in Russia around 2010 or so, he funded both pro-Putin and anti-Putin parties and kind of created a big show out of this. So he's this kind of theatrical type who creates these kind of shows and where you don't really know anymore what's going on. And the thing is that Vladislav Surkov, he just said that, okay, yes, we did it. We funded both parties. We funded the anti-Putin parties too. So, and he was also creating this Nashhi movement, the youth movement for Putin. So he is definitely someone that people should be aware of and he should be examined carefully, because he is not a stupid person. He's extremely intelligent in what he does, and we already know his emails were leaked in 2016. He's doing all this in a really micro-managerial level. So basically, when there was they were creating these separatist governments in Luhansk, Donetsk, in the Donbas area, he was micromanaging even the furniture that was put into these governmental offices. So we know, like, he was very specific about these things. So I wouldn't, like, even though the whole plan kind of leaked, so there is this Maidan 3 and something will happen, I wouldn't still I would be still extremely careful about the future and what might happen when Vladislav Surkov is kind of taking the lead, because he's a clever man.
And we see some perhaps physical manifestations of targeting or potentially divisions. And that, of course, is the poisoning of the wife of Budanov, who is the head of the SVR, of the security services in Ukrainian intelligence services. This is quite concerning, of course, because if you're going to topple the regime, you need to take out some of the key people within it, or put pressure or threaten. You need to turn others into assets, agents. And we're starting to see some little, I would say, sort of rumblings there, and how this may be separate from the Maidan 3, or it may be a constituent part of it. But certainly it's quite concerning there, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely. But I would imagine that these kind of plots are ongoing. We now know that there has been maybe around 10 assassination attempts against Budanov. So it's probably safe to say that it's, even though if there wasn't a Maidan 3, these kind of attempts would be just ongoing, because it's just how Russia operates. They operate by poisoning people, and there's nothing new about that. So we see this rather young, middle-aged 40-year-olds getting heart attacks, Russian businessmen around the world. So it's basically their modus operandi, and I don't see anything especially new in all this. So it's just something that they kind of managed to do something. So and they succeeded. So I mean, it's probably all this is being plotted in the background all the time, from both sides, I would imagine. It's just how espionage and not espionage, but how this intelligence stuff works. So, but yeah, it's an unfortunate event, of course.
And if we look at events over the last year, certainly the sort of hybrid warfare had a key figure in the person of Prigozhin, with his infamous troll factories, which, of course, one of your countrymen, Jessica Aro, has written very eloquently about those, and I was suffered as a result, of course. With the demise of Prigozhin, do we know how the troll factory infrastructure, has passed into other ownership, or how those activities are managed? Because clearly troll activity has not gone away. I mean, you and I, glancing through the comments on our YouTube channels or Twitter, will see that actually, there's a huge volume of this stuff, and it comes in waves as well. And often you can trace those waves back to some strategic purpose too, when you have an uplift in troll attacks. Do we know how that whole infrastructure has changed since Prigozhin disappeared?
It has actually changed quite a long time ago, even before Prigozhin's demise. So it's been outsourced, basically. So you look at African countries, Ghana, Nigeria, any country with relatively high level in English, there are pro-Russian and pro-CCP troll farms operating in these countries. And we've been tracking a few of them, and they are extremely clever in what they do. They're all, like, tens of aliases, and it's very difficult to find who is the actual person behind an account, for example. But these accounts that seem extremely pro-Russian, and they seem to be even like they are from Russia, they are actually from Nigeria or Ghana, and I think BBC has also done pretty good investigation on these troll farms and exposed them. So it's troll farms have been they've been outsourced they are big enterprises, and they make a lot of money, but basically you can buy these services from various countries. Before it was in Macedonia, then maybe initially in the Philippines, and now it's all around the world. So we are not sure what happened to the Internet Research Agency Precautions, the big troll farm. Is it still operational? But we know that a lot of this work has been outsourced even before Precautions, this attempt at mutiny.
And I guess once they've developed the methods, the narratives, and of course the commercial model, because you physically have to run teams of people, you have to have certain outputs. I'm sure it's almost like an anti-marketing. You'll have sort of KPIs, targets, and certain editorial sort of control. So it's a whole kind of anti-business, as it were. But once you've developed that, which of course the troll farms in St. Petersburg experimented with those, refined the business model. Once that's done, you can export it. I mean, there's nothing to stop you from, trading up and building those kind of units wherever you want. And is that what we've seen, really? We've gone from experimentation to really the kind of factory phase now, where these things are out there and can be reproduced at will because the methodologies are known and documented.
Yes. So yeah, it's a business model. And did you hear about this? Okay, I think have you heard of this Team Jorge, this Israeli corporation or enterprise that was kind of exposed? So they were just selling, it's an Israeli company, they were selling all kinds of social media manipulation, but also hybrid operations. So, and it was a very expensive service, but they were exposed by a group of investigative journalists, and they did some really effective hybrid operations. So, for example, they sent some politician's wife letters that allegedly came from his mistress, that the mistress didn't exist, of course, but like this kind of stuff, and sending sex toys to politicians' homes, so it seems like they are perverts or whatever. Like these very clever hybrid operations in order to defame people and make them look bad. Especially in kind of conservative, with conservative backgrounds, and but they also sell this traditional social media manipulation, making news and kind of stories seem bigger than they actually are by amplifying them, adding engagement, and then kind of creating, building these artificially inflated accounts that seem much bigger than they actually are. And so this social media manipulation, it has become huge business, and it's a very secretive business. There's a lot of shady stuff going on, but it's there's a lot of money there. So I don't see any reason why this kind of operations wouldn't be used and sold.
And if we look at Russian propaganda in particular in relation to both, internal politics will have a different kind of setup than external influence campaigns. Do we have a good idea of who the targets are of the trolling activity? I mean, there's obviously going to be sort of YouTube channels like the ones we're running. My estimate is that about anywhere between 1% and 2% actually of the comments on my channel are troll activity, which is relatively on the low end of the spectrum. It can be a lot higher for other people. But do we know what the full spectrum of targets are? Are they also, say, targeting Russian opposition, who are now running quite extensive media empires? Are they targeting politicians, media, diaspora at large? Have any studies been done that you're aware of?
It's usually people who people who benefit Ukraine in some way. So you take people who, for example, people who work for the Helsinki Commission, try to figure out corruption and so on. They are being attacked aggressively, or many politicians who are supporting military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine are being targeted. I think we are still being targeted somewhat. I would say that for me, it's at least has been increasing lately, but it's nothing. I mean, it doesn't really affect anything at the moment. But for of course, any Ukrainian official like Zelenskyy is heavily attacked, and Zaluzhny. So basically, those people who somehow have the ability to benefit Ukraine or bring them, I don't know, any kind of aid, donations, military aid, humanitarian aid, or people who attack Putin or his inner circle are also heavily attacked on social media. So yeah, these are basically the main targets right now.
And you've documented the Russian assets and useful idiots across not just the West, around the entire world. And some of them are extraordinary sort of figures. It's a very toxic brew. Do you have a sense of how those figures have changed, the various influence amongst those, and the kind of narratives they're pushing? Because there is a constant evolution of these narratives. You mentioned Jackson Hinkle being a classic example there, but there is a whole plethora of them. And the event you talked about in the US, the War Machine event, that was like a gallery, rogues gallery of these kind of useful idiots. If you want to know who they are, it was very helpfully sort of collated for us there in terms of sort of that US gallery of useful idiots. But how has this changed really since you started monitoring it, and how have the narratives been evolving?
What I have noticed that a lot of them have become less active after the Hamas attack. Some of them have become extremely more active, like a lot more active. And basically, because their whole engagement is revolving around the war in Ukraine. A lot of them disappeared after they noticed that their engagement is going down. Because as I said earlier, people are usually focused on one thing, so they start reading up on the situation in the Middle East, and the Ukraine will be something that's in the past, basically. Some of them have disappeared or just quieted down a lot. Some of them have tried to pivot to this Middle East situation. Some successfully, some have failed miserably. Like, for example, DD Geopolitics, they are basically dead when it comes to engagement on social media. But yeah, so what seems to be going on is that some are trying to follow these trends to stay relevant. Some people try to stay on this Russia-Ukrainian war, but yeah, see decrease in their engagement, and basically, I don't know if there has been that big drastic change in the, I call it Vnik sphere, the whole network. The structures are still there, but maybe there are just new narratives. And whenever the narrative is, the focus shifts away from Ukraine to some other, like it did with the situation in the Middle East, it benefits Russia. So, and Russia's strategy has always been to try to take the focus away from them. So they will never talk about any of the civil rights or human rights or whatever, demographics or whatever is the problem in Russia. They will never discuss that. They will just try to refocus. So, okay, what about the United States? What about Ukraine? What about Israel? Whatever the target is, they try to shift the focus away from Russia, because that's where the real problems are, and they don't want to talk about it.
It's a massive sort of roundabout of whataboutism, isn't it? The last question here really is relating to our response. One of the reasons, I created my channel, I think one of the reasons you do what you do is to inform Western audiences and potentially to highlight what, for instance, Ukraine is doing to fight this sort of digital disinformation, and to help create techniques to counter it. NATO, of course, has been tremendously successful in doing that within the particular hybrid warfare bubble where it operates. Do you have any sense, though, that outside of that, Western governments have been arming themselves to defend against these hybrid warfare attacks? I mean, there's a lot of stuff happening on the academic side. There's lectures and there's this and there's that, and that's fascinating. But do you see any actual campaigns taking place or methods being developed and deployed by Western governments to protect themselves, their citizens, and their institutions?
Well, in the EU, we have the Digital Services Act, which is good start, I would say. I think the real problem will be when generative AI really breaks through, because then we're gonna have a bad time. We're gonna have a real hard time, like, making difference between what's real and what's kind of AI generated content. That's gonna be a real challenge. But I would say the Digital Services Act, which is basically this kind of set of rules, EU-wide rules against disinformation and this kind of information warfare, it's a good start. It's way too vague to actually work, but it can be complemented with new rules and so on. But lately I've been talking about that instead of censorship and instead of closing things, we should focus on educating people, increasing awareness, critical thinking, and media literacy, because this is something it's basically a cognitive battlefield that we have to, where we have to do the fight. So people have to be skeptical. People have to be aware of these strategies that are utilized in information warfare, and it's basically what governments could do is implement and integrate this kind of critical thinking and media literacy skills into school curriculum, for example. And this is where I usually like to. Finnish people are not bragging often, but I like to say that this works in Finland, and we can see it because we barely have any kind of pro-Kremlin segment anymore. We can talk about Johan Beckman or Janusz Putkonen, but they are basically, people consider them to be clowns. That's the general idea or the general view of them. And I often say that this is because we have a very good education system that encourages critical thinking and media literacy. So those would be probably the best starting points for any government to kind of increase awareness around these issues.
Well, that's probably a great place to end there. The idea of taking action, not feeling helpless in the face of Russian information aggression, and actually looking at success stories, looking at what works and recycling that. I mean, I hope you carry on with your tremendously important work, because I know Russian sort of BS is not going to stop, even if there is a cessation of hostilities within Ukraine under whatever circumstances. I don't imagine the Russian informational warfare ending anytime soon. So it's incredibly important what you're doing and other people who are fighting in the information sphere. Pekka, thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights with us again.
Thank you very much. Anytime. This is always great fun.
Well, hopefully next time we'll be face-to-face. We can have a sort of panel event at some point next year and share that with the audience on the topic of information warfare, which I think is something, people really need to get their heads around, especially with generative AI and all these other threats on the horizon.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much.